She said it was an investment, then drove away in a new car. I am Margaret, 58, widowed, and Lily is my only child. The morning before the call, we ate together at my kitchen table, the smell of coffee and buttered toast hanging over the plates. We laughed about nothing special. She touched my wrist and said she could make my savings grow, that it was time I let her breathe for both of us. I said I trusted her. She smiled like it was already decided. That was Maple Street Branch, Tuesday morning at 9 a.m., and I thought the day would be ordinary. It wasn't. When the bank called about a $12,000 transfer, my breath shortened. I stood by the sink, still holding the same mug, trying to remember if I had agreed to anything beyond convenience. I hadn't. I checked my bag for the little blue folder where I kept receipts and the last statement. Everything was there except certainty. I phoned her. She laughed it off. "You're mixing things up," she said. "It's a standard move." The words slid around the truth, but they didn't touch it. If that money disappeared, I'd be making choices I couldn't afford, and I knew exactly who would pay. 2 days later, Ryan pulled into the driveway in something shiny and loud. He waved from the driver's seat and leaned over to kiss her cheek. She looked back at me like we were sharing a joke. "An investment in our future," she said. My mouth went dry. What kind of daughter calls a car an investment? I swallowed the question and walked inside. I'd keep my voice. I'd keep my notes. I'd keep what was left. I picked up the phone and called the Maple Street branch again, this time asking for a person who could read a screen and tell me the truth. "Mr. Hayes, please," I said. He remembered me from Tuesday. His tone shifted when I said my name. I pressed the handset close. I told him I needed to know the last withdrawals and how the transfer happened. He asked me to come in with ID. I set down the receiver with a click that sounded final. The kitchen looked smaller that afternoon. The table was still set for breakfast, as if we hadn't left it. I ran a cloth across the wood and found a faint ring where her mug had been. A bracelet she'd borrowed years ago lay in the drawer. I slipped it on like armor. I took the blue folder, the checkbook, and the card. I put on a jacket, locked the door, and told myself I would not raise my voice when I arrived. I would not be dismissed. At the branch, Mr. Hayes met me by the side desk and asked me to sit. He glanced at the screen, then back at me, and printed a slip. He turned it around gently, as if it might bruise me. "This shows the transfer," he said. "From your account to a linked user." I stared at the slip. "Linked how?" He answered carefully, "By online access permission." I shook my head. "I didn't authorize that," I said. "Not like this." He nodded once. "We can record that statement." I needed the truth to stand on its own legs, not begging for balance. I asked for a copy. He slid another printout. "If you prefer, we can restrict further online access until this is resolved. You would have to sign here." I signed, hands steady. He watched me sign, then placed a small sticker on the corner of the form and the account record, a quiet signal that someone had raised a concern. "Keep the slip," he said. "If you need to show anyone, it's plain and clear." When I stepped outside, Lily and Ryan were already in the parking lot, idling in the car. She beckoned with 2 fingers, like I was late for something small. I walked to the passenger window. She rolled it down and tilted her head, all patience and polished manners. "You're making a mess over nothing," she said. "Stop, Mom." My heart pounded. I kept my voice even. "Show me the bill of sale." She stared. "You're overreacting. Show me the source of funds." Ryan shifted. "It's complicated." "It isn't." I took one breath and stepped back. The words were short because long ones give people time to dodge. She looked past me toward the doors. "We're due somewhere," she said. "We can talk later." She held my gaze for a beat that felt like a dare, then rolled the window up. The car slid away, left a smear of exhaust, and a line I wouldn't cross again. Inside, Mr. Hayes waited near the copy machine. "Would you like to place a note on file?" I said yes. He guided me to a small office and typed while I spoke. I told him I'd trusted family, that I wanted a review, that I would bring any documents I had. He printed my words and handed them back to read. They looked smaller on paper, but they were mine. He signed below with his name, simple and legible. "This begins the process," he said. "It won't be fast." I nodded. "I'm not going anywhere." Back home, the quiet pressed close. I opened the blue folder, slid the transaction slip inside, and wrote one clear line on a fresh page. "This money is the roof over my head." I underlined it once. I tucked the bracelet into the drawer and closed it carefully, as if the past might rattle loose if I slammed. Tomorrow I would ask for printouts of every recent movement and lock whatever doors I still could. Tonight, I would let the paper stand guard. The account was nearly empty. She told me I was being dramatic. Her words landed like a slap. The kitchen clock ticked too loudly, each sound pushing me toward silence. I had spent the day gathering papers, looking for anything that could prove what my gut already knew, that something was wrong with my account. When I showed her the numbers, she laughed, sharp and careless. "Mom, it's not that deep," she said. "You're reading it wrong." I set the bank folder on the table and pointed to the withdrawal slip. "That's not my signature." My voice trembled, just once. Leaned against the counter, phone in hand, scrolling as if this was just another dull argument. "You must have forgotten," she said. "You sign so many things." I kept looking at her, trying to find the girl who used to save dandelions for me in old jars. All I saw was distance. The sound of her nails tapping the phone screen filled the pause between us. "Do you think I'm stupid?" I asked quietly. "I think you're tired," she said, smiling without softness. "You always get confused about details." The room felt smaller, airless. That word, confused, stuck. It was too deliberate, too rehearsed. I gathered the papers and walked away before my anger made me reckless. At the bank the next morning, Mr. Hayes met me near the glass counter. He was kind, practical. "Let's review the withdrawals," he said. He brought up a form on his screen, printed it, and slid it across. "This one stands out. My signature, copied but uneven, like someone trying to mimic my hand after watching me write. We can start an internal review," he said, lowering his voice. "I'll make a note that you've disputed this authorization." I looked down. On the desk was a small stack of forms, and beside them, a framed picture of his family. It reminded me of the photo I kept tucked in my wallet, the three of us at Christmas, lights behind us, Lily's head on my shoulder. I opened the wallet and stared at that frozen smile. "Do you keep yours because it helps you remember who you're doing this for?" I asked. He nodded. "Always." The office smelled faintly of toner and coffee. I signed the report and asked for a copy. "This will go to the fraud team," he said. "They'll compare the handwriting." I thanked him, voice low. He looked at me for a second longer than polite. "You're doing the right thing." On the walk home, I rehearsed what I'd say to her if she called. Something calm, something that couldn't be twisted. But the truth was, my hands shook. Every streetlight felt too bright, every sound too close. By the time I reached my porch, my heart was pounding like I'd run miles. That night, I sat in the living room with the bracelet she'd given me years ago. I used to think it meant connection. Now it felt like proof of how well she knew the shape of my trust. I laid it beside the ledger where I'd started writing every expense, every date, every word she said. I would not forget again. The phone rang once, then again. Her name glowed on the screen. My stomach turned. I didn't pick up. I listened as it rang out, the sound echoing through the quiet house like an alarm I couldn't silence. I wanted to believe she'd call to apologize, but I already knew the tone she'd use, that mix of pity and accusation meant to make me doubt myself. For a moment, I thought about the words Mr. Hayes had used. The right thing. It didn't feel like it yet, but maybe truth started in discomfort. I looked at the clock. It was nearly 9 p.m. I turned off the light and told myself I'd sleep. Instead, I watched the dark, tracing the glow from the phone on the table. It lit up again, her name filling the room. She said I'd lost my mind. The words spread faster than I could defend myself. By the end of that week, Mrs. Carter from across the street stopped me on the sidewalk with pity in her eyes. "Lily's doing her best," she said softly. "It must be hard for her." I smiled, but inside my skin felt hot, as if embarrassment itself had a pulse. I walked home gripping the mail too tightly, my heart beating against the humiliation. By the time I reached the porch, I understood what my daughter was doing, painting me as unstable, helpless, someone in need of protection. It was clever. Once the world believed I was confused, no one would question her control. Later that afternoon, the phone rang. A calm voice introduced himself as Dr. Stone, my family doctor. "Your daughter asked me to check in," he said. "She's worried about you." I almost laughed. "I'm fine," I told him. "Of course," he said, "but let's just make sure." When I arrived at his office, the air conditioning hummed too loudly. The smell of antiseptic and paper made everything too sharp. He asked polite questions. Names, dates, simple math, the kind of test meant to expose cracks in memory. I answered them all. "What day is it?" he asked. "Wednesday," I said. "You're right," he nodded. "And who's the president?" "The same man I didn't vote for," I replied. He smiled. He hesitated when he set the clipboard down. "You seem completely capable," he said, almost apologetic. "Sometimes children worry too much." I knew better. Worry wasn't the reason. Control was. When I left, the afternoon heat struck me like a curtain. The warmth rose off the pavement, stinging my neck. I sat in the car and let it burn there, thinking of all the times she'd told me I needed her. Now she was using that trust as a weapon. That night, I placed the doctor's summary on the kitchen counter. It was short, but it said everything. No cognitive impairment observed. I read it twice, memorizing the words. That paper became more than proof. It was a shield. If she tried to question my capacity again, I'd hold it up like armor. I kept imagining her face when she'd learn I'd passed. She'd tilt her head, pretend to be relieved, then shift the story again. "The tests don't always catch early decline," she'd say, or "Mom's good at masking." I knew how this game worked: create doubt, then step in as savior. The next morning, I watched her pull into the driveway. She was too calm, too certain. "You went to see Dr. Stone?" she asked, stepping out of the car. "He called me," I said. "Of course he did," she answered. "I'm your emergency contact." Her tone was sugary. "He said you did well. That's great." I wanted to scream at the act she was putting on, but I didn't. "You've been talking to my neighbors," I said instead. "They think I'm sick." She shrugged. "I'm just trying to protect you." "From what?" "Yourself." The air thickened. I stared at her, every word deliberate. "If you think I'll hand you control of my life, you're mistaken." She smiled, a quiet, pitying smile. "You already did, Mom. You just don't remember." I walked back inside and closed the door, my pulse hammering. I leaned against the mirror in the hallway, staring at my own reflection. For a second, I almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. Tired, cornered, but not defeated. I opened the drawer and touched the paper again. It wasn't much, but it was enough. It said I was still me, that I still had a voice. She wanted to erase that, to turn me into a story she could tell to banks and courts. I wouldn't let her. The next day, I made 3 copies of the report and stored them in separate folders. One in the kitchen, one in my car, one at the bank. If she wanted to build a case that I'd lost my mind, she'd find resistance written in my own handwriting. But I could feel the next move forming in her eyes, even before she made it. She'd filed a guardianship petition. I saw my name listed under incapacitated. The word didn't even look real at first. It sat there in bold letters, printed on thick paper that felt rough between my fingers, as if the page itself was proud of what it carried. The courthouse air was dry and heavy, the kind that sticks to your throat. Every chair creaked as I walked past, people glancing up, not out of cruelty, just curiosity. I was the woman being judged before I'd even spoken. Across the aisle, she sat with Ryan, whispering something that made him smirk. She wore a pale jacket, calm and composed, the perfect image of a dutiful daughter. I could almost admire her performance. Almost. But all I could hear was the echo of her voice saying, "You can trust me. when she'd first asked for access to my accounts. The clerk called my case number, and the sound bounced around the walls like a warning. I stood, palms damp. Grace, the attorney I'd hired the night before, leaned close. "Remember, this is a petition for guardianship, not a judgment. We'll fight it." She spoke with quiet authority. Her presence steadied me, like a handrail in a storm. I'd never been in a courtroom before. The wood panels glowed under the fluorescent lights, and the judge's bench felt impossibly high, as if the distance itself was meant to remind us of our place. "Case of guardianship for—" The clerk hesitated before saying my name. "Filed by Ms. Lily Carter, requesting temporary control of her mother's financial and medical decisions." I felt my chest tighten. Temporary control. My life, summarized in 2 words. Grace rose. "Your Honor," she said firmly, "we were not notified of this filing until this morning. My client contests both the factual and medical basis of the claim." The judge adjusted his glasses. "You'll have time to present evidence," he said. "For now, we'll hear the petitioner." Lily stood, every movement rehearsed. "My mother's been struggling," she began, her tone low and trembling just enough to sound genuine. "She's been forgetting things, mixing up her bills, calling me at odd hours." She paused, eyes glistening. "I'm only trying to help her." I couldn't stay silent. "That's not true," I said, voice sharper than I intended. Heads turned. "I passed a full evaluation last week. Dr. Stone confirmed I'm fine." She tilted her head, pity dripping from every gesture. "Mom," she said, as if speaking to a child, "no one's questioning that. This is just for your safety." "Safety from what?" I snapped. "You?" Ryan shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. The judge raised a hand. "Please," he said, "address all comments through counsel." Grace touched my arm, reminding me to breathe. The court clerk handed the judge a stack of documents. I caught a glimpse, my own signature, shaky but real, or maybe copied. Grace asked for a closer look. The judge nodded, and she flipped through the pages. "This form was submitted as evidence of consent," she said. "We'll need to verify its authenticity." Lily smiled faintly. "I only filed because she refused to accept help." Help, that word again. It had become her shield, the weapon she used to make herself the hero of a story I didn't recognize. When the hearing paused for recess, I stepped into the hallway. The marble floor was cold through my shoes. Grace joined me, holding a copy of the petition. "They're pushing for temporary guardianship," she said quietly. "It's standard in cases like this, but the narrative's working against you." "She's lying," I said. "I know," Grace answered. "But right now the paperwork tells her version. We'll rewrite it." Her certainty gave me something to hold. "How long until the next hearing?" I asked. 2 weeks, she said. "In the meantime, the judge might grant temporary authority. It's procedural, not permanent." Procedural. Another word that didn't make me feel any better. Inside the courtroom again, the judge returned to his seat. "Given the medical concerns raised and pending full review, the court grants temporary guardianship to the petitioner." The sound of the gavel was final, sharp, and cruel. Lily didn't look at me. She didn't need to. She already knew she'd won the first round. I stood there, motionless, the edges of the paper digging into my hand. My name, my identity, had been rewritten in legal ink. I'd lost something more than money today. I'd lost the right to be believed. Grace whispered, "This isn't over. We'll appeal." But the words drifted past me, hollow against the noise of my own heartbeat. The judge granted her temporary control. The bank wouldn't let me touch my own money. The words hit harder than I expected. The teller's voice was polite but firm, rehearsed. I could see the reflection of the fluorescent lights flicker across the glass divider, washing everything in a cold glare. Behind her, the printer hummed like it was part of the judgment. "I'm sorry," she said again, sliding a paper toward me. "Your account is restricted under guardianship status." My mouth went dry. "Restricted by who?" She hesitated, eyes flicking to the monitor. "By court order," she said quietly. "Filed last week." A line of people stood behind me, shuffling in irritation. I picked up the paper. My name sat there again, underneath Lily's, hers listed as the guardian of record. A stamp with the court seal glared up from the corner like a scar. I pressed my fingers to the page. It felt smooth, almost waxy, and unreal. I left the bank without remembering how I got to the parking lot. The sunlight was sharp, burning against my eyes. I sat behind the wheel and stared at the numbers. My own money, frozen. My independence, frozen. I called Grace from the car. "She did it," I said. "She actually did it." Grace's tone was clipped but calm. "I'm filing an emergency motion today," she replied. "She misrepresented your competency. We'll challenge it." I stared out at the road, watching cars pass, all of them going somewhere ordinary. "How long will it take?" "Maybe a day for a hearing date," she said, "but we'll need to show financial harm." I gave a bitter laugh. "That won't be hard." That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad. I wrote down every figure I could remember: the last transfer, the car purchase, the utilities she'd offered to handle, my remaining balance, $3,200 in a separate savings account, my checking account, $980 before the freeze, the old joint account she'd emptied, $2,220 gone in a single week. The total, written at the bottom in shaking handwriting, was $6,400. Every digit looked like a wound. I decided that if she wanted to play this through paperwork, I'd fight with paperwork too. Grace called it building the spine of the case. I went through drawers and folders, finding receipts for the payments I'd made in good faith. Each slip of paper smelled faintly of ink and dust, like proof of a life I still owned. I spread them across the table, building small piles: utilities, groceries, transfers, gifts, the evidence of being a functioning adult, not an invalid. When the phone rang again, it was Lily. Her voice came light, almost cheerful. "Hey, Mom, did you make it to the bank?" "I did," I said. "Good. They were supposed to let you know about the change." "The change?" "It's temporary," she said. "Just until things settle. I can take care of bills. You can relax." "Relax," I repeated. "With no access to my own money?" She sighed. The sound rehearsed. "You're upset. I get it. But this is safer. You don't have to stress about all those numbers anymore." "You mean the numbers you already spent?" She went quiet. "You lied to the court," I said. "You told them I couldn't manage my finances." "I told them what they needed to hear," she snapped. "You were being impossible." The line went dead. I sat there, phone still warm in my hand, the silence after her words settling heavy in the room. The clock ticked too loudly, marking time I could no longer afford to lose. The next morning, Grace called. "I've scheduled an emergency hearing for tomorrow," she said. "We'll present proof she misled the judge. Bring everything: bank statements, receipts, any texts you've got." I looked around at the piles on my table. "I've got more than enough," I told her. "Every dollar accounted for." "You'll need to stay composed," she said softly. "She'll try to provoke you." "I won't let her." Grace paused before hanging up. "We have one shot tomorrow." That night, I left the papers spread out across the table. The lamp cast long shadows over the numbers, over the seal at the bottom of the notice. I touched it one last time, feeling the edge of the embossed stamp. Cold, solid, real, but not permanent. Not if I could help it. I turned off the light, leaving the room in stillness. The faint outline of the court order burned behind my eyes. Grace whispered, "We have one shot tomorrow." The hearing room smelled like cold coffee and nerves. It was the kind of smell that clung to everything, cheap anxiety and exhaustion mixed together. The long wooden tables gleamed under the overhead lights, and the shuffle of papers sounded like rain. I sat at the respondent's table beside Grace, my hands folded too tightly in my lap. Across from me, Lily adjusted her blazer, pretending to read through the documents she'd probably rehearsed all week. Ryan sat behind her, restless, his foot tapping against the floor. The judge entered without ceremony. "Let's proceed," he said. His voice was even, Practiced. He'd seen too many families rip themselves apart in rooms just like this. Grace stood first, holding a thin file. "Your Honor," she began, "we have newly submitted evidence relevant to the question of financial misrepresentation." She opened the folder, and I caught the faint scent of perfume rising from the page, her perfume, Lily's, the same floral sweetness she'd worn since college. I felt my stomach tighten. "These are messages sent from the petitioner's phone," Grace continued, confirming that she used her mother's funds for personal purchases unrelated to care or household needs. The judge adjusted his glasses. "You may present." Grace handed over printed screenshots. Even from where I sat, I could read the words. "Ryan's gift paid off. Mom won't notice for a while." There it was, in black and white. Lily's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, this is taken out of context," he said quickly. "The messages reflect an authorized family purchase." "Authorized?" Grace cut in. "The funds were withdrawn from a restricted account prior to any court order. There was no authorization, only access." The judge's gaze shifted to Lily. "Do you deny sending this message?" She hesitated just a second too long. "It was a joke," she said finally, forcing a laugh. "Ryan and I were talking about getting him a car. My mom agreed—" I interrupted before Grace could stop me. "That's a lie." My voice was steady, cold. "I never agreed to buy him anything." Lily turned, her smile brittle. "You're confused again," she said softly. "It's been a stressful time." Grace put a hand on my arm. "Let the record show," she said, "that the respondent disputes the petitioner's claim of consent." The judge nodded. "Noted. I'll review the evidence in full." He leaned forward slightly. "You understand, Ms. Carter, that any further transactions during this proceeding could be considered a violation?" Lily's jaw tightened. "Yes, Your Honor." "Then I recommend you refrain." For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear behind her composure. The same girl who used to twirl my rings around her finger when she was little now twisted her own nervously under the table. I remembered how she'd once begged me to let her borrow my favorite gold band for her school dance. "It's just for one night," she'd said, and somehow that night had stretched into years of taking, bit by bit, until nothing was left to borrow. Ryan shifted in his seat. He wouldn't meet my eyes. His shirt collar was too tight, his confidence unraveling. I wondered if he'd realized yet that she'd drag him down with her if she had to. Grace requested an audit of all recent transactions tied to my accounts. "We believe there are multiple irregularities," she said. "A neutral financial examiner can confirm." The judge agreed. "I'll issue an order for review within 24 hours. Both parties will comply fully." The words landed like oxygen. Finally, something official, something real that couldn't be dismissed as another overreaction. Grace's expression softened. She leaned closer and whispered, "That's the beginning, not the end." When the hearing adjourned, I stood slowly. Lily avoided looking at me, busy whispering with her attorney. I could see her grip tighten on her phone, her thumb moving over the screen, probably messaging Ryan or deleting whatever evidence she still thought she could hide. In the hallway, the hum of conversation faded as Grace walked beside me. "You did well," she said. "You didn't let her bait you." "She's not used to being challenged," I said quietly. "She'll make a mistake soon." "She already did," Grace replied, glancing back toward the courtroom door. "She left a trail." As we reached the exit, I caught a flash of movement near the corridor. Ryan was standing by the vending machine, hands buried in his pockets, his face pale. Our eyes met for just a second. He looked guilty, scared. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away, fast. I waited for him to stop at the corner or look back. He didn't. Grace called after him, but the hallway swallowed him whole. I exhaled slowly, the air thick with the scent of old coffee and something else. Something like relief, though I didn't trust it yet. Ryan stepped outside and didn't come back. He vanished the morning of the audit. The call came just after sunrise. Detective Mill's voice was brisk, official. "Ryan's gone. Left 2 days ago." His words echoed in the quiet of my kitchen, bouncing off the walls like a verdict. The only sound after he hung up was the low hum of the refrigerator, steady and indifferent. An hour later, I played the voicemail he'd left for Lily. His voice was rough, shaking. "I can't face this," he said. "Tell her I'm sorry." Then the line clicked dead. I replayed it twice, trying to hear guilt, fear, anything that might make sense. But there was only cowardice. When I called Lily, she answered with a soft sniff. "He didn't mean to leave," she said. "He just needs time." "Time to do what?" I asked. She hesitated. "Figure things out." "Or run from them?" "Mom," she said sharply, "you're not helping." Her performance was convincing, her voice low, trembling, but her eyes, when I saw her later, told another story. There was no grief there, just relief. Grace arrived at noon with a folder under her arm. "The auditor finished early," she said, sitting across from me. "We have a clear trail." She spread out the pages, each one stamped and dated. "Here, $2,000 from your savings into Ryan's account, then $4,500 from the joint, $1,200 in cash withdrawals, and a $300 transfer to a dealership." She drew a line under the final total. "That's $8,000, all traceable." I felt my chest tighten. "That's where it went?" "That's where it started," she said. "The rest we'll uncover through the subpoena." The kitchen smelled faintly of detergent, the kind Lily used when she still lived here. It used to comfort me. Now it made my stomach turn. I thought of her and Ryan laughing in that car, the one bought with my money, the one that symbolized everything I'd lost without signing a single check. "She'll crumble once she realizes he's gone," Grace said. "Her support is gone, and now the paper trail points straight to her." I nodded, though my hands were trembling. "What happens next?" "I'll prepare the motion for asset recovery," she said. "We'll reclaim what's left, but I'll need her cooperation, and she's already dodging calls." "She always runs when cornered," I said quietly. "She thinks silence keeps her safe." Grace looked up. "It doesn't. Not when we have evidence." The phone rang again that evening. Lily. Her voice was smaller this time. "I can't reach Ryan," she said. "His things are gone. His number's disconnected." I said nothing. "You don't care, do you?" she demanded. "You cared when it was my money," I replied. "That's not fair." "Neither was what you did." The line went quiet. I could almost hear her breathing, fast and uneven. For a moment, I thought she might apologize. Instead, she said, "You won't win. You're not strong enough for this." She hung up. I sat there in the dark kitchen, the weight of her words pressing down on me. I wasn't strong once, maybe, but I was learning. Pain teaches faster than trust ever does. When Grace called later that night, her tone had changed, tighter, more purposeful. "The police confirmed Ryan crossed state lines. He's officially listed as a person of interest in a financial fraud investigation." "And Lily?" I asked. "She's not cooperating, but she doesn't realize yet that her name's on half those transfers. The moment we file the next motion, she'll have to answer." I exhaled slowly. "She'll panic." "She'll slip," Grace said. "And when she does, we'll be there." I looked at the stack of receipts and notes on my table, each line a reminder of what she'd taken, each page a small victory in a larger war. The balance of power was shifting. She wasn't the one writing the story anymore. Grace's voice steadied. "We'll subpoena her next." She cried in the hallway, then called me a thief. Her sobs started soft, the kind that draw people's eyes. A few courthouse clerks stopped mid-step, unsure whether to comfort her or move on. I stood still, folder in hand, the weight of the day pressing between my ribs. Just minutes earlier, we'd been in mediation, facing each other across a long table with the walls closing in like witnesses. The air in that room had felt cold enough to sting. The mediator, Elliot, kept his tone neutral. "Let's begin," he said. "Both parties have agreed to this voluntary session." Lily looked fragile, voice trembling, as she spoke. "She's been harassing me, calling at all hours, spreading rumors, threatening my fiancé." Her tears came on cue. "This is emotional abuse." I stared at the table, forcing my voice steady. That's not true. I've called twice in 2 weeks. About missing money. About my accounts. Elliot raised a hand. Let's stay factual. We'll let evidence speak. Grace slid a folder across the table. We have documents to clarify financial transactions, she said, including one showing a recent vehicle purchase. Lily's head jerked up. That car was a gift, she said. She wanted to help us. Let's read exactly what the record says, Grace replied. She turned the page, revealing the title. Gift from Mother's account. It read in neat type. My name. Her signature. No mention of consent. Lily's composure cracked for the first time. Her lip trembled, but it wasn't grief. It was anger trying to hide behind embarrassment. You're twisting everything, she said sharply. Elliot leaned forward. The document speaks for itself. I'll include this in the summary record. She slammed her hand on the table. She's making me look like a criminal. Grace met her glare calmly. You did that yourself. The temperature in the room dropped again. Elliot's expression didn't change, but his eyes softened as he looked toward me. Do you have anything else to add? I nodded once, just that I want my life back, my accounts, my dignity. My voice didn't shake this time. He noted something on his pad. We'll proceed accordingly. The session ended without ceremony. Lily brushed past me, her perfume faint but familiar, leaving a trail of tension behind. In the hallway, she stopped suddenly, turned, and faced me. Her tears started again, bigger this time, for show. You're destroying your own family, she said. No, I told her. You did that when you lied. She looked around, noticing the people watching. Then she dropped her voice to a hiss. You're a thief. You stole from me. The words landed like ice water, not because I believed them, but because I saw in her eyes that she did. She'd built her own story so completely, she couldn't step out of it anymore. Grace appeared beside me, calm and composed. Don't engage, she whispered. Let her talk herself into the hole. I'm fine, I said, though my pulse was hammering. Lily turned and stormed off toward the elevators, clutching her cross pendant like it might save her. For the first time, I didn't feel pity. I felt clarity. Elliot approached us with the transcript draft in hand. I'll finalize this for the court, he said. Given the inconsistencies, this will move to a public hearing. The words hung in the air. Public. No more secrets. No more controlled narratives. As we left the courthouse, the sun cut through the gray sky, catching the edge of my folder. For once, I didn't look down. The balance had shifted. Elliot said, This will move to a public hearing. The town hall was packed. Neighbors, reporters, everyone. Rows of metal chairs filled the room, their legs scraping against the floor as people shifted, waiting for the drama to unfold. The overhead lights were blinding, washing everything in white. It wasn't just a court hearing anymore, it had become a spectacle. Faces I'd known for 20 years were there. The woman from the grocery store, my old neighbor, even the pastor's wife. They all wanted to see what truth would look like under the glare. Lily sat across the aisle, her lawyer whispering something she clearly wasn't hearing. Her skin looked pale, almost translucent. The once perfect hair, the confident posture, gone. For a second, I saw the little girl who used to curl up beside me on the couch, begging for one more story before bed. Then she turned, met my eyes, and all I saw was resentment. The local reporter, a young woman with too much energy for a room like this, stood up and read from a small notepad. The ongoing case in the family division, commonly referred to as the family betrayal case, centers around allegations of financial exploitation and falsified guardianship claims. She looked around before continuing. Newly uncovered text messages appear to confirm the misuse of funds. A ripple went through the audience. I could feel their eyes on me, then on Lily. The reporter unfolded a printed sheet. One message reads, quote, "Used mom's money, worth it." Gasps broke out. Someone muttered, "That's cruel." Another whispered, Imagine doing that to your own mother. Lily's lawyer stood quickly. Objection to public reading of personal correspondence. But the judge raised a hand. The message was entered into record. It's fair for summary. His tone was calm, final. Grace, sitting beside me, didn't flinch. She slid a folder forward across the table and stood. "Your Honor," she said evenly, "this is the official court record from the prior motion. It includes verified transfers totaling $8,000 and the notice of withdrawal from the respondent's accounts. We are submitting this in conjunction with today's findings." The judge nodded. Admitted. Across the room, Lily's hands tightened around a folded newspaper. The headline, already printed before the hearing began, read, "Daughter faces inquiry over guardianship abuse." She tried to hide it, but the image was already seared into the crowd's memory. The overhead lights flickered briefly, drawing every eye to the bench as the judge reviewed the documents. My heart pounded, but not from fear. This time it was something steadier, sharper. He cleared his throat. "After review of new evidence," he said, "the court finds that the temporary guardianship order is to be revoked, effective immediately." There was an audible gasp. Even the reporters froze. I didn't move. I couldn't. It was as if the room had gone silent, except for the scribbling of pens and the faint whir of a camera lens zooming in. Grace leaned closer. "It's over," she whispered. But it wasn't. Lily turned her head slowly toward me, her voice breaking. "You ruined me." I met her stare. "You did that yourself." She looked away, tears welling but refusing to fall. Her lawyer put a hand on her shoulder, trying to keep her from walking out. The crowd began to murmur again, voices overlapping, sympathy, shock, judgment. I heard one woman whisper, "I always thought that family was perfect." Another said, "You never really know what happens behind closed doors." The judge tapped his gavel once. "Order." He looked directly at Lily. "Given the financial discrepancies and misuse of authority, this court will proceed with a full restitution hearing." Lily's lawyer started to object, but the judge didn't let him. "You'll have your chance to respond," he said firmly, "but not today. This hearing is adjourned." As people stood to leave, flashes from reporters' cameras lit the room again. I saw Grace tuck the folder under her arm, the words, "Temporary guardianship revoked," still visible on the top page. The clerk reached for the microphone to announce the dismissal, but her hands were trembling. Outside, as I walked down the steps of the town hall, the late afternoon sun hit my face, warm but blinding. Reporters called out questions I didn't answer. My name was already being written into their headlines, but for the first time in months, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. Behind me, I heard the door slam, followed by hurried footsteps. I didn't turn around. Whatever came next, she would have to face it in daylight, the same light she'd tried so hard to keep me out of. The judge requested a full restitution hearing. She refused to meet my eyes. The courtroom felt smaller than before, the air heavier. Papers shuffled, chairs creaked, and the judge's robe rustled as he settled back into his seat. I stared at the stack of documents before me, the paper rough beneath my fingertips. Across the aisle, Lily sat perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the desk. For once, she wasn't performing. There were no tears, no trembling voice, just silence. The clerk read aloud the ledger. $12,000 withdrawn from savings, $3,200 from the secondary account, $5,800 in vehicle and personal expenses, $2,000 in unverified transfers. A pause followed, and then the total, $23,000. Each number struck like a bell. I remembered them all, the withdrawals, the forms, the days I spent convincing myself there had to be some mistake. But numbers didn't lie, and neither did signatures. Grace leaned slightly toward me and whispered, "This is airtight. Don't react. Let the record speak." The judge adjusted his glasses. "Do both parties confirm these amounts?" Lily's lawyer nodded. "We concede to partial liability, Your Honor, on the grounds that a portion of the funds were intended as familial support. However, given the misrepresentations of guardianship, my client accepts the court's discretion." The words sounded rehearsed, emotionless. Lily still wouldn't look at me. Her hands were clasped, knuckles pale against the dark table. The judge continued, "In light of the evidence and previous findings, restitution is hereby ordered. The respondent will repay the total of $23,000 over a period of 12 months. The first payment is due within 30 days. A low murmur ran through the room. Grace smiled faintly, the kind of smile professionals save for victories they can't celebrate. She leaned close enough for me to hear her say, "This is a rare outcome. Most never see a full ruling like this." I nodded, but inside there was no triumph, just relief, and something emptier beneath it. The justice system had spoken. The ledger was balanced on paper, but motherhood didn't balance that easily. The bailiff passed the written order to the clerk's desk, the pages crisp and final. I reached out, tracing the edge of the copy placed before me. The texture caught under my fingers, reminding me how real it was, how official, how cold. Across from me, Lily finally moved. Her lawyer whispered something. She shook her head. Then her voice, barely audible, broke the quiet. "I don't have that kind of money." The judge looked up. "You will have to find a way. The terms are firm." "I can't," she said again, louder this time. "She's taking everything from me." Grace straightened, calm but unyielding. "What she's taking back is hers." The judge tapped his gavel once. "Enough. This is a ruling, not a debate. The record stands." Lily's eyes darted toward me then, sharp, wet, defiant. "You wanted me to fail," she whispered. I held her gaze. "I wanted you to stop lying." Her lips trembled, but she said nothing more. The court reporter's keys clicked steadily, every word finding its place in history. Somewhere behind us, a reporter whispered, "It's over." But I knew it wasn't. Not really. Money could be repaid, but trust couldn't. When the session adjourned, people filed out in quiet lines. I sat for a moment longer, hands resting on the table, trying to breathe in what victory was supposed to feel like. It wasn't sweet. It wasn't even satisfying. It just was. A correction, not a healing. Grace packed the folders neatly. "We'll monitor the first payment," she said. "It's enforceable now." I nodded again, but my eyes drifted to the other side of the room. Lily still sat there, staring down at the document before her. Her lawyer placed a pen in her hand. For a second she froze, then gripped it like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The judge looked over, waiting. "Ms. Fletcher," he said evenly, "please sign acknowledgement of the order." The sound of pen scratching against paper filled the still room. My chest ached at how small her signature looked, how uncertain. She signed the order with trembling hands. The letter arrived 3 weeks later. It came in a plain white envelope, the kind used for bills, the return address written in her familiar looping hand. My stomach tightened the moment I saw it. I set it on the kitchen table and just stared for a while. The house was quiet, except for the ticking clock over the doorway. Everything else felt suspended, waiting. When I finally opened it, the paper trembled between my fingers. The faint scent of her old perfume rose as I unfolded the page. Sweet, powdery, the same one she'd worn since high school. For a moment, I was back in the car with her at 16, music playing too loud, her laughing at something I'd said. Then I blinked, and the words on the page pulled me back to now. "I thought I was helping us," she wrote. "I was wrong." No excuses, no long explanations, just a single paragraph written in blue ink, steady and careful, like she'd practiced every line before she let herself write it down. At the bottom, her name, no flourish, no heart over the I, just the plain truth of her handwriting. I sat there for a long time, reading it again and again. The apology was real, but it wasn't enough to change what had already been done. Grace called later that afternoon. I read her the note over the phone. "Keep it," she said. "It's not forgiveness, but it's evidence of acknowledgement. Sometimes that's as close as the system gets to an apology." I slid the letter back into its envelope. The paper felt fragile, like it might dissolve if I breathed too hard. "She didn't ask for anything," I said quietly. That's something, Grace replied. Most people double down. Take the piece where you can find it. After I hung up, I carried the envelope to my desk. The drawer still held the same things it always had: paper clips, old receipts, and a stack of photos from before everything fell apart. One of them showed her at my birthday years ago, smiling, holding a cake with shaky frosting. I tucked the envelope beneath that photo, between the past and whatever came next. The sun was low outside, slanting across the counter. I watched the dust swirl in the light, tiny specks dancing through the air like a world that didn't care about human messes. The next few days passed in a strange calm. The phone stopped ringing. The reporters moved on. The court clerk confirmed the first payment had been made, just one small step in a long 12-month plan. Grace said the process would run its course. But my thoughts kept drifting back to that letter. It didn't erase the betrayal, but it softened something sharp inside me. I found myself remembering the little gestures, the way she used to braid my hair when she was small, or how she'd hum while washing dishes, never quite on key. Those memories had been buried under months of anger, and now, piece by piece, they were surfacing. Still, every time I thought of her words, I heard what wasn't said. No mention of the money, no mention of the lies, just regret in a form that couldn't be returned to sender. I met Grace for coffee the following week. She looked tired but satisfied. "You've done more than most people ever manage," she said. "You held the line." "I didn't win," I told her. "Not really." "Justice doesn't feel like winning," she said. "It feels like balance, barely." I nodded, stirring my coffee until the swirl of cream disappeared. "The house feels too big now," I admitted. "Then maybe that's your sign," she said gently. "It's time to decide what you keep." That night, I sat in the living room, the same one where the first fight had started months ago. The furniture, the framed photos, the quiet, all of it seemed to belong to another life. I looked toward the desk where the envelope sat tucked away, invisible but heavy with meaning. Forgiveness wasn't something I could declare out loud. It had to grow in silence. I took a deep breath, walked to the window, and looked out at the empty driveway. For once, I didn't feel trapped. I just felt ready. I decided to sell the house. The for sale sign went up on Monday. I stood on the porch, watching the wind push it gently from side to side. The red letters looked bold against the white background. Final. Unapologetic. By afternoon, the realtor called. "We already have interest," she said. Her tone was bright, efficient, practiced. I told her to go ahead with the showing. Then I hung up and walked back inside, the house echoing around me. The floors creaked under my steps. It wasn't just sound, it was memory. Every mark on the wall, every dent in the doorframe carried a story. The scent of furniture polish still lingered faintly, even after the movers had gone. I pressed my palm against the kitchen counter, the same one where Lily had once leaned, laughing, asking for coffee. Now it was bare, smooth, and waiting for someone else's life to fill it. 2 days later, the realtor came by with the offer. "It's a good one," she said, flipping through the papers. "They're a young couple, no contingencies." Her pen scratched across the page as she circled the figure. $210,000. I repeated it quietly. 210. The number sounded both large and small at once, enough to start over, enough to draw a clean line through the years that had turned bitter. Grace stopped by that afternoon just to check in. "You sure you're ready?" she asked, scanning the nearly empty living room. I nodded. I fought hard for this house, but keeping it doesn't feel like winning anymore. She smiled softly. "That's growth talking." I laughed under my breath. Maybe it's exhaustion. The realtor arrived later with the contract. The pages smelled faintly of ink and new paper. I read every line, every clause, even though I knew Grace had already looked it over. "No mortgage balance left," I murmured. "Clean transfer." "That's right," the realtor said. "You'll walk away with everything free and clear." The words caught me off guard. free and clear. I'd spent so long fighting for ownership that I'd forgotten what freedom felt like. I took the pen and hesitated for just a moment. The house around me seemed to breathe. Somewhere, a loose shutter knocked against the frame. "Go ahead," she said gently. "It's time." I signed. The scratch of the pen was louder than I expected. When it stopped, I sat back and let the quiet settle. "It's done," I said. She smiled. "Congratulations. It's a good price, especially for the neighborhood." "Price isn't what I cared about," I replied. "It's the clean ledger." She looked at me, puzzled for a second, then nodded slowly. "I understand." After she left, I walked through the rooms one last time. The hallway seemed longer than before. My footsteps echoed against the bare walls, each sound folding into the next, until it felt like the house was breathing out everything it had held. I stopped in the doorway of what used to be Lily's room. The sunlight fell in through the blinds, cutting thin, bright lines across the floor. I remembered the day we'd painted the walls. She'd insisted on doing it herself, splattering paint on her jeans, laughing until we both gave up trying to be careful. Now the walls were blank again, not erased, just ready for someone else's story. Downstairs, I found the realtor's folder sitting on the counter. I placed my copy of the deed beside it, folded neatly. I checked the drawers, made sure nothing was left behind. A few keys, a screwdriver, an old receipt tucked under the edge of the drawer liner, small fragments of a life already fading into memory. Grace had told me once that closure doesn't arrive with a speech. It slips in quietly when you stop resisting the next chapter. I understood that now. I took the keys from my pocket and set them on the counter. They made a soft clink as they landed, the sound echoing faintly through the empty kitchen. I turned toward the door, looked back once, and smiled. For the first time in a long while, the space felt light, not because it was empty, but because it no longer held pain. I left the keys on the counter. It smelled of paint and second chances. The air in the apartment was sharp and clean, a mix of new walls and open windows. Boxes were stacked neatly against the corner, labeled in my handwriting: kitchen, clothes, papers. It wasn't much, but it was mine. For the first time in years, the space didn't hold anyone else's shadow. Just quiet, and the hum of a small refrigerator that sounded steadier than my own heartbeat had in months. The lamp on the table gave off a soft, golden glow. I'd bought it for $38 at a thrift store down the street, a simple thing with a fabric shade that reminded me of calmer times. I sat beside it that first night, signing the lease papers one last time. The ink smudged slightly under my thumb. "It's official," the housing officer had said earlier. "Welcome home." Home. The word had lost its meaning somewhere along the way, but now, here in this small apartment, it felt possible again. The scent of paint still lingered as I opened a fresh notebook and began to write. The first page was rough, unsure, like I was learning a new language. I wrote about the day the court finalized restitution, about the letter, about the silence that came after. Then I wrote about freedom, not the kind granted by judges or lawyers, but the kind you claim quietly by refusing to stay angry. I paused, pen hovering. The clock on the wall ticked softly. Each sound seemed slower, more deliberate, like the room itself was breathing with me. Grace had helped me through every form, every hearing, every storm. She'd texted earlier asking, "Settling in?" I replied, "Trying." Her message came back almost instantly. "You're doing better than you think." I smiled. Maybe she was right. The next morning, I walked down the block to the market. The cashier gave me change with a kind smile and said, "You new around here?" "Just moved in," I answered, trying to make it feel like home. "Well, welcome," she said. "You picked a good building. Quiet people. Decent coffee across the street." It was such an ordinary exchange, but it stayed with me. Ordinary was something I'd missed. That afternoon, I unpacked a box of old photos. Some I thought I'd thrown away. I kept a few, placed them in a small frame by the window. Not for nostalgia, but for closure. The rest went into a drawer, neatly stacked, no longer heavy with what-ifs. By evening, I found myself drafting a message I'd thought I'd never send. My fingers hesitated over the screen before I finally typed, "I forgive you, but I'm not coming back." I stared at the words. They didn't feel angry. They didn't even feel sad. They just felt true. I hit send. There was no reply. For the first time in years, I didn't wait for one. Instead, I made tea and sat under the lamp, the soft glow wrapping the room in something that felt like safety. The window was cracked open just enough to let the city air in. Somewhere outside, a car door slammed, and then quiet settled again. I thought about all the nights I'd spent in that old house, waiting for apologies, explanations, anything that would make betrayal make sense. None of it had come. But here, I realized I didn't need it anymore. Forgiveness wasn't absolution. It was release. I closed my notebook and turned off the lamp. The room dimmed to a gentle stillness. My body felt lighter than it had in years. I stood, stretched, and looked around. This place was small, yes, but every inch of it belonged to me. Every echo, every creak, every breath of air. I took one last sip of my tea and smiled to myself. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was finally mine. Then came the knock at my door. I almost didn't open it. The knock came early, gentle, uncertain. For a moment, I thought it might be the landlord or a neighbor, but when I looked through the peephole, I saw her. She was standing there, small against the pale morning light, her hands clasped together like she didn't know what to do with them. I froze. Part of me wanted to wait it out, to let the silence do the talking. But something deeper, something quieter, made me turn the handle. When the door opened, we just stared. She looked older, thinner. The kind of change that doesn't come from years, but from consequences. Her eyes stayed low until she whispered, "I paid it all back." Her voice trembled on that last word. I nodded once. The air between us felt heavy, but not sharp like before. "I know," I said. "Grace told me." She looked relieved and lost all at once. "I didn't come for thanks," she added. I didn't want you to hear it from someone else." The morning light spilled across her face, catching the edge of the small bracelet on her wrist, the one I'd given her long ago. It glinted for a second, just enough to make me remember the girl she used to be. "I didn't think you'd ever open the door," she said quietly. "I almost didn't," I admitted. "But here you are." We stood there like that, caught between what was and what might still be possible. She hesitated, biting her lip. "You once told me to make it grow. I never understood what you meant." I took a slow breath. The sunlight shifted again, stretching between us. "It wasn't about money," I said softly. "It was about what we do with what's left. Maybe you still can, just not with dollars." Her chin quivered. "I tried to hate you," she said, "for exposing me, for taking everything." "You took it from yourself," I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "But you can still build something new." She looked up for the first time. Tears had gathered, but she didn't wipe them away. For once, there was no pretense, no defense, just exhaustion and truth. "I don't know how," she said. "Start small," I told her. "You don't fix life in one gesture. You fix it by showing up different next time." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was real, and real things take their time. She nodded slowly. "You've changed," she whispered. "No," I said. "I just stopped bleeding." That made her cry. She covered her mouth, shaking, the kind of cry that sounded like relief more than regret. I let her. There were no more arguments left to win, no stories left to correct, only the truth sitting between us in the doorway. After a while, she took a small step back. "Thank you for opening the door," she said. "Thank you for knocking," I replied. The light had shifted again, brighter now, cutting through the space between us, just like it used to at breakfast all those years ago. I could almost smell the coffee, hear the laughter that came before everything cracked. But it was only memory now, soft, distant, harmless. She reached for her bracelet, fingers brushing over it like it held the weight of everything she couldn't say. Then she turned and walked down the hall. No goodbye, no promise to call, just quiet steps fading until the hallway was still again. I leaned against the doorframe and watched the morning fill the room. My heart didn't hurt this time. It just felt steady. I didn't close the door completely. I left it open, just a little, enough for air, for light, for something new to come through if it ever needed to. I chose peace, not permission. Did you enjoy this story? Tell me which city you're listening from. I read every comment. If the story touched you, you can support the channel with a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this every day. Your encouragement really helps. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what moment stayed with you. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's plenty more on the channel as well. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the next life story, with respect and gratitude.